But I believe you don't really mention politics or politicians.
I did meet Indira Gandhi. Then I asked her, I heard you have caviar for breakfast. She didn't like that question. She said, where did you hear that? So I said, well, I just.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paramita Ghosh of the New Indian Express. And today we have everyone's or everyone in India's favorite author, Ruskin Bond, with us on another episode of Let's Book It. And today we will be discussing his latest book, Life's Magic Moments. And it's a reflection on his childhood days and old age and different places and Mother Nature, which has been an inseparable part of his life. But there's also quite a bit of pondering on the fleeting nature of human ambitions, the sanctity of dreams, and yes, Mr. Bond still dreams, and the endless generosity of the planet we inhabit. Mr. Bond, you've just marked your 91st birthday. And, I was just wondering that there must have been lots of celebrations there usually are on your birthday. And you're a bit like, if I may say so, the Mount Rushmore of Landor. A lot of people drive up every year just to meet you. But were you kind of secretly pleased this year about the cancellations? Because I heard that you've also not been keeping well.
Oh, yes. Well, that's. No, I'm all right. Just nothing very unusual. Uh, but as you know, a few weeks back, we had that terrible tragedy, that terrorist attack in Kashmir, where in fact even one of our family members is studying, and and the general mood was one of both of of both sadness and anger. And I thought it was not a good time to have a public celebration of the usual sort of book signing that I normally have in the bookshop right in town, where a lot of people gather. So I thought it wouldn't be appropriate. So we just said another time, another day. And of course, I can't stop myself becoming 1 year older. So, but don't go in for a lot of celebrations. Huh? My doctors told me not to eat too much cake or
Okay.
sugar. So, um, so I'm down to savories like tikkis and samosas.
Oh, that doesn't sound too healthy either.
No, no. I guess you're right. You can't win nowadays. I mean, with
Yeah,
all
that's true.
nutrition experts around you, I'm bullied at times. That don't
Hmm.
eat this, don't eat that. What? Um, so what's left? I even thought I'd have a very light breakfast of cornflakes, and then I was told, well, don't add sugar to them. They're already carbohydrates. So, so what do you do? Huh?
Right, right.
I just ignore most of it. Mm.
Great. Mr. Bond, tell us about the new book, Life's Magic Moments. Is it a bit like the one you wrote last year? Hold on to your dreams, a journal dedicated to young friends, telling them about your youthful follies. I remember reading this book, and I there was a lot of good advice. So I list my favorites. If you don't expect second helpings, you won't be disappointed. The trick is to help yourself to a substantial first one. So, is this going to be another book of good cheer?
Yes, there will be. You see, after this is a sort of continuation of Hold On to Your Dreams. You're right, and I've already written a third, which would hopefully come out in a few months whenever Penguin wants to publish it, and that's called A Life Worth Living.
Right.
So it's more reflections on life and why I've enjoyed most of it. And well, in fact, there's a fourth too, which I've been. It's difficult to stop me from writing.
No, 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 please don't.
And they are in a way like a journal. because although I don't keep a regular diary or journal, now from off and on I put down my thoughts, observations, and anything funny that's happened to me. I put them down on a pad, on a large writing pad. Uh, as you know, I write by hand,
Mhm.
everything. Um, so, so that in a way, the material for a book is there. It's I can conjure up something out of what I've written and you know kept on the bedside table. But I hope also to write a couple of new children's stories in the coming months. I have one already done, and there will be other things too. Hmm. Someone's asked me to do a book on the small towns of India.
I was going through the page of contents and I found the randomness of the chapters quite delightful. I mean, I could just start reading from wherever I wanted and not worry about continuity. I mean,
Hmm.
after a few pages of your favorite pickles, there's a chapter on meditation and yoga, and then on to words from the heart, your ambitions, your favorite group of singers, the ink spots. Had never heard about that one.
They were a little group going back to the World War II and those 1940s. Four black American singers used to sing as a
Oh,
group. And they were very different from the usual sort of pop artists of that period. And so I sometimes, although I'm technologically illiterate and I'm very much an old-fashioned person, but I do take advantage of the latest technology. So although I might be grumble away about technology, I make use of it too.
I was wondering, like about the when I asked about the randomness of the placement of the chapters, I was just wondering, is this by design? Did you do this because you think attention is fractured these days, and people can, from thinking or reading about pickles, start thinking about yoga and this ability to read without interruptions? I mean,
Yes, but no, it's not by design at all. Usually, what happens is I lie in bed. Either I go to bed very late or I lie in bed early in morning, and if whatever comes into my head hmm, is what goes down into the journal, which is usually kept. The writing I do is early morning um, in a little sunroom, which I think I've mentioned in one.
yes.
And so I sit in the sun if it's winter and in the shade if it's summer. But this year we don't have a summer. And
Hmm.
so I'm in that sunroom for nearly an hour until breakfast comes. So then that's when I put down what I've been just thinking about or dreaming about. Sometimes even dreams come into my writing. And so it's without there's no continuity, except that a sort of natural continuity which might occur out of the very fact that one entry follows another, as one day follows another.
A lot of young people are into journaling these days. So, would you say that the era of the big novels, the Balzac novel, or the Thomas Mann novel, or even a Wuthering Heights,
Mm.
is over?
Yes, well, it's over for me in a way because I've never been although I'm a great reader, I'll read two or three books a week. Always have since my school days. So, but, and I certainly enjoyed Wuthering Heights, which is not too long.
Yes.
But I would seldom read a book or attempt to read one which goes to 400 or 500 pages, a novel. Very long novels. I don't my attention span, somehow can't deal with it. And I think the attention span of many young people today can't deal with it either. So not only have my writing is on the shorter side, my short stories, or if it's a novel, they're novellas, short novels, or essays or poems. But so, and so is my reading in a way. So I'll read, happy to read a detective story or a novella, or a journal even, because a journal is something where you there doesn't have a designed continuity, So it just happens by itself day after day. So you can stop where you want to, maybe, or jump. and and I do that. I've often begin a book at the end, which is really unfair on the author, especially a, a crime novel or detective story. I'll read the
Why
first
would you do
three
that?
chapters and then I'll think, oh, why don't I? Why wait? Let's just look to and turn to the last chapter and see who did it. Why spend a lot of time in between?
Mr. Bond, people of all ages read your books. Is it a myth that the young people don't read today?
um, it it is a myth. You see, uh, young well, not just young people, but even old people, were in the minority 50 years ago or more. In my, when I was at school, in a class of, say, 30 boys, and we had a good library, um, but out of that 30 boys, there were just two of us who actually read books, who read the books we borrowed from the library. Um, Everyone else had to take one out, but it was usually returned unread. Maybe some of them read comics, but but in those days there was not even television. Leave alone, all the apps and the mobile phones and the things that provide entertainment now. There wasn't even television. You could go to the cinema. We could go up to town once a month and see a picture, and that was about it. But even then, boys did not read. Maybe a few girls did, but boys didn't. Um, they were into other things. Huh? Well, so it was then even a minority pastime. But today, because of the spread of education and the fact that there are hundreds and thousands of schools and children and young people who can read, so out of them, even a very small minority, say if just one or two in 100 read books, in terms of actual numbers, let's say across the country, mm, that's hundreds of thousands of people, of readers, mm, and who far exceed the number of readers, let's say in 1950, when I finished school, which is one reason why my first novel, which I wrote which was published in 1956, I'd written it a year or two earlier, uh, it hardly sold then. In fact, it went out of print for some years. But today it's selling much better than it did when it was first published. And finding
Right.
new readers, young readers, and even a few old readers. So, so more people are reading. Uh, Not they're not the majority. They are the minority, and they always will be, because they're the lucky ones, the ones who can get some pleasure in and enhance their life through what books can give you.
This book also delves a lot about nature. But I've always wondered, and I thought I'd ask you since you're here, why you didn't take to English weather? And could you talk a little bit about particular details about maybe certain flowers in the Dehradun hills or trees that helped you make the decision to return from England? Or do you think that's putting too big a demand on trees and flowers
Yes, it
to
is.
think that
It
they'd
is.
bring you back?
No, I came back because the main reason would have been personal relationships. I came back for not so much for family, but certainly for friends, for uh, people I cared for, yes, the town in which I'd grown up and its surroundings, and for the because I did, and for the good things I'd enjoyed as a boy. So I think had I maybe left India at an earlier age, at a very young age, I might have adapted more to the UK or England and not come back. But by the time I went, I was 17, and I think I was already set in my ways and very much rooted to the, you might say, the hills and valleys and this part of the world. And so I was drawn back by the place, by people. The nature was something I took for granted then. I think it's only as I grew older that I became more appreciative of it. And especially after, say, in the 1960s, when I spent a few years working in Delhi, and I got very restless there because I wasn't writing too well, and kept thinking I'd feel happier and I'll write better if I go up into the hills and live in a in a cottage in the forest, which I'd seen on one of my visits. So I threw up a job, a good one, and I came up. That was 1963, 64. And I've been here ever since, except for, short trips here and there. So, and having come up and settled down in the hills, I came gradually closer to my natural surroundings. So that's when I became, started falling in love with trees and flowers and plants and beetles and butterflies and anything connected with the natural world. And writing about them too. So though in my very early work there isn't that much of nature. I mean, my early story is all about meeting pretty girls on trains or railway stations. So trains played a great part, and the
Yes.
stations played a great part. But as when I came up to the hills and in my 40s and 50s, I started relating more to my immediate surroundings. And so my writing hadn't changed much, but let's say, the atmosphere and the surrounding influences varied to some extent.
In this book, you also mentioned some of your favorite books. The Hindu Holiday, Meet Mr. Malina, and you said that eclectic reading is important. Do you think everyone should have a favorite book to turn to, or do you think reading is should be like coursework, or like you begin by reading the canons and then uh,
It depends on the individual, I think. Some of us do get attached to a particular book or author and like to go back to that writer from time to time or to a particular book. Um, uh, and others would just keep on wanting to discover new writers. Well, with me, it's a bit of both. Um, I don't read many new writers, but I like to discover writers sometimes who've been forgotten or neglected over the years, and who had something to say and who wrote well, because there have been many. After all, we hear about the bestsellers and the writers who are successful, but we don't hear much about those who might once have been successful or didn't make it either. Mm. And some of them are really worth reading. And I always fed it around for books like that. And so if I I could make a list of. It's easy for me to keep on making lists of favorite books and authors like the few you mentioned. After all, who reads or hears of J.R. Ackley nowadays? Hmm? And yet he was a very fine writer. Um, and and uh, and I was reading uh, a, a brilliant biography not long ago, which was written in the 1920s. It was a biography of a failed writer.
who is
So,
that?
you
Which
know,
book is that?
failure is interesting in itself. It's fascinating because I've had my failures and I've been so close to it, all right, all my life too. And always at the back of my mind, always in the back of my mind, and in spite of having written so much, I think or feel, in a couple of years after I've gone, I'll be forgotten. Nobody will be reading me. Hmm?
No,
So,
bad
yeah,
chance.
but that's there. Uh, um, that success is sweet, said Emily Dickinson, to those who never succeed.
Also, this book, I saw that you mentioned a few of the world leaders whom everybody's sort of talking about these days. Like there's Putin and there's Trump, and but I believe you don't really mention politics or
I'm not
politicians in.
very political, though I get angry at times, like most people. You know, read the paper and you start fuming at, what are these people up to? Making such a mess of the world and of everything. Uh, but
Right.
but otherwise, politically, I don't have any particular ideology or I don't get worked up about politics. But it's still it's interesting and well, a person like Trump would make a great subject for a biography. Uh, a funny one. Hmm? Hmm.
Did you know you were one of Jayalalitha's favorite authors? I believe if she was in a bad mood, somebody had just to hand her a Ruskin Bond book. Did you know that?
I I heard that only sometime after she'd passed away. I think I think it's nice to know that a politician found some pleasure in my stories. Um, and though I've never met many politicians.
You've met Nehru, I think you mentioned.
I didn't meet him. I just attended an event where he gave a talk on his publishers and who had
Right.
his books. Yeah. So I didn't meet him, but I did meet Indira Gandhi. Yes, I interviewed her once.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to share from the event? Like, if have you
Well, I
ever?
don't know. It wasn't a. I, Actually, I interviewed her in connection with uh, an assignment I had to write about her father, Jawaharlal Nehru, for a children's book, and so she very obligingly asked me to come to her office in Delhi in South Block and gave me about half an hour. But I sort of climbed up. It maybe I wasn't used to interviewing big important people, uh, and I sort of ran out of ideas. And then I asked her, "I heard you have caviar for breakfast." But she didn't like that question. She said, "Where did you hear that?" So I said, "I just read it somewhere." She said, "No," she said, "I know how that story began because when I went to Russia, she said, they used to give me caviar for breakfast, but I don't have caviar for breakfast here." So I was asking her questions about her father, and that was just before she declared the emergency, I think. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Uh,
Um,
I did read other politicians. I met. There was a very nice gentleman called Acharya Kripalani,
right.
the congressman, and I had a train journey with him overnight, journey to Bangalore.
Where he was complaining about something, I think you mentioned.
He wasn't complaining. He was having an argument with an American uh, semi-diplomat who was traveling with us, and they were arguing in general about the Indian way of doing things and the American way of doing things. And
Which is what?
hmm?
Which is what?
Well, just customs and diplomacy and things like that. It was at the time of the uh, Dalai Lama's exodus from Tibet. Hmm?
Oh, how interesting.
Yes, yes. I was involved in that in a small way because I was working for an organization then called CARE,
Oh,
and
okay.
they put me in charge of that Tibetan relief program. So I
Okay.
had to travel wherever there were Tibetan refugee camps, which was mostly in the hills, Darjeeling,
Hmm.
Dalhousie, Dharamsala, Simla, Mussoorie, etc., and Mysore. That's how I got down to Bangalore, and then we went. Acharya Kripalani was involved, you see, in Tibetan relief. He'd
Yeah.
started the Swatantra Party. Anyway, so that I did meet a few politicians because I was in Delhi and, moving around in those circles.
Right.
Not, I was a nobody. I wasn't well known as a writer then. I was doing some journalism, but this was a job I had. Off and on over my life, I've taken up the odd job when the going got tough uh,
Hmm.
from writing. But as soon as I got a chance to go back to freelancing and writing, I would throw up the job. I threw up so many jobs just because they were boring.
Like, what were some of the boring jobs that you've had to do?
The most boring job. Well, I wasn't exactly boring, but when I was in Jersey in the Channel Islands, they they put me in charge. I worked for the public health department, and my job was to take pay packets with the cash in them down into the. They had an ancient sewer system, and they had these workmen working there. The sewers went out into the sea, and my job was to go around with their pay packets and deliver them. Uh,
Okay.
in these look rather like being in the Phantom of the Opera or the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you know, down
Yes.
in a in a sewer. And well, the author, um, Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables, um, he'd he'd been exiled to from France, and he was living in the Channel Islands for some years, Guernsey and Jersey, and the sewers that he describes in his novels were, I think, based on the ones that existed there
Right.
in Jersey.
In this book, your age is quite a presence. Is that deliberate? Is that something you wanted to sort of tell the reader? And I mean, they're of course written in your usual trademark humorous manner of how you were not able to distinguish between two team jerseys because they all appeared red.
Uh,
So
Two teams. Uh,
you mentioned two
Watching
team
television.
jerseys and they all seemed red to you.
Yeah, that's my eyes are very weak now. So you look all red to me too at the moment.
Oh, I
You
am in
don't
red.
mind, I hope.
I
Don't mind being red. But you are wearing a red
am
jacket.
in red. I am in red.
Yes, you are in red, and somehow it's taken over the screen. Hmm?
Mm, okay.
So
It's
that
like it's
so
nearly six now. Is this close to your writing
I'm
time?
being interviewed by the girl in red.
Are we close to your writing time now? I mean, is this
No,
the
no, I
time?
don't write in the evening. I write in the
Uh,
morning. I've been reading a bit before we started, and I'll read a bit more now. Maybe later I'll put on the one of the news channels, see what Mr. Trump is up to, uh, or anything else that's happening. I hope nothing unpleasant. And I sometimes watch sport. So the cricket is over. Very sadly, it ended on a sad note. That
yes.
Bangalore, and then but there's other things. There's sport coming up. Tennis is on. And so I do follow sport. I used to play football. Uh, but people sometimes don't believe it now, but I was I captained my school football team for 3 years. And
Okay.
about a month or two back, I was down on the road, and some kids were playing football, and the ball came bouncing towards me, and I couldn't resist it. So I gave it the ball a mighty kick. The ball flew away, but I was hobbling about in agony because I'd forgotten
Mm,
I had gout in my left foot.
okay.
So for about a week, I was hopping around and no more
Mm.
football. But you can't stop me writing.
That's true. That's true. Thank you, sir. We have had a really good time talking to you, and
Thank,
I hope you had a good time as well. Thank you
thank,
for sparing the time.
thank you.
Thank you.